Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 7 of The Last of Us. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So this is the episode I was kind of expecting we were going to get. This was the Left Behind DLC story. And I think it's so neat how they parallel this with, present day. Like, I was curious, like, okay, so, like, are they going to flash back and forth between this and, like, present day? But it's, like, the tail end and the beginning and the tail end is present day because Joel was like, yo, go to Tommy. Now, I don't think it was like go to Tommy and get help. It's like, no, go to Tommy, leave me behind. I'm going to slow you down. And so it's like, right, for them to be on the opposite sides of the last episode where he was like going to leave Tommy with her because, like, oh, I can't do anything for you. And he's like, you can't do anything for me. I'll slow you down. Like, you need to get back to Tommy and he can help finish this. And even if not, very least you'll be there, you'll be taken care of, and I don't have to worry about you. And just when she's getting to like the top of the stairs of the basement, like that's when she thinks about, obviously we got a little bit extra with the whole, like, getting a little insight to like the Fedra school that she was at. I thought that was such an interesting, that Sergeant kind of gave her Waiter two options. It's like, hey, you can be a grunt, basically be kind of in a terrible, crappy situation, or you can eventually get in the same position as me where we get to be warm when it's cold, or we get to be cold when it's hot. We get to kind of like stay behind and protect the city. And it's so interesting to see how, like, and I think this ends up being a neat little parallel that they did where Ellie had a much more positive outlook on Fedra, but I think it's such a neat thing. Like, well, not neat. It's actually the cruel reality of it. She found out the truth about Fedra. Her eyes were open to it with her adventures with Joel because it made her see, like, oh, how ugly Fedra can be. Like, when you did the parallel being like in episode 3 where it's like, whoa, they found those dead bodies. Like, why did they kill these people? Were they even infected? No. Then why kill them? It's like, dead people can't be infected, which I'm sure that now with this story too resonates even more so hearing that. But yeah, she was at least willing to give, it's like, no, Fedra, they're the good guys, like the Fireflies, they're the terrorists. She had that perspective on things. And it's interesting because Riley kept being like, yeah, you don't know everything, and now her worldview has been opened. She's kind of seen the cruel reality of people, how cruel Fedra can be. I mean, even they weren't part of those conversations. She was in the room, but we don't know how much she was hearing when Henry talked about how crappy people could be. It's such as like Fedra, I don't like her. She was with Sam at the time playing with him. So I don't know how much of those conversations between Joel and Henry she heard. Maybe she heard them all, but regardless, since I referenced episode 3, I didn't think about it at the time because going back a little bit, I know the gist of what the Left Behind story is. Most of the Left Behind story is just what this episode was. Riley and Ellie hanging out. That what happens in this episode is pretty much all that happens. I don't think anything really deviated from it. I was curious about certain things, like when they didn't go to I was like, wait, they're not going to the Halloween store? And it's like, that's the last thing they do. I'm like, okay, there it is. Because I believe those masks they wear are two of the choices. Because I think you do get to pick what mask you. I think there's a few selections, but maybe I'm wrong. But I feel like I remember the werewolf and the clown. I think one of them was like a witch mask or something, like a green witch mask. But that's the thing. Like, I remember some of like the Left Behind story, but it's I don't remember a lot of the in dialogue. So that's why some of this stuff in the episode, I'm like, I actually don't remember if that's straight from the game or not. Because I remember the story beats. I mean, because it's only like a 3-hour thing, but it's mainly like Riley and Ellie like in the mall, like hanging out and stuff. Like that's the main gist of that story. But the thing I was saying before is I didn't realize in episode 3 the Frank and Bill episode being such a parallel for Ellie and Riley in so many different regards. For one, the episode's kind of structured in the same way, and I think obviously that was done specifically like that. I wonder, did they specifically do that episode like that too, to also kind of make that direct parallel to the Left Behind story, knowing that they were going to incorporate it in this regard. But the fact is, like, yes, it started off with Elliot and Joel in the beginning of the episode, and the end of the episode, and everything in between was this developing situation between Frank and Bill. And now you have the same thing with Riley and Ellie, but what's sadder is, like, at least Bill and Frank had years together, which you can make the argument Riley and, I mean, we have no idea how long Riley and Ellie have been best friends. I mean, they probably grew up in Fedra together, but it's like, they had this moment, at least Frank and Bill had years at them being a couple and everything, building a life for themselves. And it's like, right, especially because Ellie and Riley were like at first were not in the best place because of the back and forth that they had. And then just with things kind of developing into whether it's this even sadder parallel, just because it's like, they didn't have the years that they should have. They're so young, and it's like, God, they're just like, once again, there's just so many deep parallels because Riley was like, yo, we're not going to take option one, which is what Bill and Frank did, So I think that's kind of an interesting, like I said, deeper parallel. But anyway, just kind of further breaking things down. Riley joining the Fireflies, I didn't remember that storyline element. So do correct me in the comments down below. I don't remember if that was a story beat from it. Like I said, I don't remember the ins and outs specifics. I remember the story beats of like, hey, they're having fun, and then like the ending is what the ending is, right? But I didn't remember like the whole angle of her. Maybe they had those back and forths in the game, and I just don't remember. I just remember it just being like fun times in the mall. That's what I mainly remember, but I don't remember like the specific details of the dialogue. Riley convincing her, it's like, oh yeah, let's go out, like, I joined the Fireflies, like, let's go and have, like, some fun or whatever. What I thought was so interesting, too, is, like, she also said that story of, like, oh, like, I hope this doesn't end up like a 7-Eleven situation. She's like, I'm trying to keep my other eyebrow intact, and I was like, wait, did they ever talk about that in the game? Because it's a very distinct situation with Ellie's eyebrow. Like, obviously, it doesn't get brought up much, but it's a very distinct characteristic that it's like, oh yeah, I was like, did they ever talk about it in that game of, like, how that happened? Was that in the Left Behind dialogue? I was like, that's interesting. And that Riley was kind of a part of that, like her eyebrow situation being what it is. So I thought that was fascinating. Like I said, maybe that's directly from the game. Like, I just don't remember that, because it, at least main story wise, I don't believe it ever came up about that. Like, it's just not a significant enough thing to really bring up. It's just character detail that's not that significant. So like, that's why I feel like if it was going to be anywhere in the game, it would have to be Left Behind. Once again, like, to anyone that hasn't never played the game, once again, this is a DLC. It's separate. Like, whereas in this story, it's used like where it is story plot wise. That's not where it is in the game. Like, what happened with Joel and Ellie, where they are right now, does happen in the game. But the Left Behind story, it's a whole pocket story in itself, because it's an isolated story about Ellie's past. Because it came out after the game came out. Like, the Left Behind DLC came out sometime later. So, once again, kind of, I talked about it times and time again. I've been alluding to it. I think I even referenced the title by name. I even believe that's the title of this episode, is straight up Left Behind. Which, once again, there's layers upon layers upon layers to that. But, yeah, like, them just in the mall kind of, well, them in the mall, having fun. But before that, I do love, like I said, the parallels of, like, like I said, Ellie's very, like, pro-Fedra to some extent. It's like, hey, Fedra's not all bad, but it's like, but then, but you have, Riley being being more, against it. It's like, yeah, the authoritative, like, dictatorship and how they run things and how they kill people and they hang people, that they're the real criminals. Like, that juxtaposition between both of them. And once again, it's like, Ellie's eyes have been open to the world now with her adventure with Joel, seeing more of the world. And once again, it reflects back on that line from her. It came up like twice where she was like, you don't know everything. And it's like, it's that thing of like, right, you don't know, you don't realize how little you didn't know at the time, This also ties into the conversation that because the whole Left Behind story is what Tess and Ellie were talking about in episode 2. She was like, how'd you get bits? Like, oh, I was in the mall. It's like, were you by yourself? And she hesitated. And I think I made a point of that in the episode. It's like, oh yeah, she kind of hesitated when she answered that. It's because of this. She wasn't alone at the time. She was like, yeah. And especially because Tess was like, oh, you have a boyfriend? You're like, she was like, no to that, so either way, not getting too caught up in the politics of like their different politics, which I guess like truth be told, you can almost look at that as like a deeper parallel of like, yeah, we still get along despite our different belief systems or different politics to some extent. It's kind of I think a deeper parallel you can also kind of draw to like life in general. But yeah, once again, it's just them having fun, and you can tell the entire time, like, the way Ellie's been feeling about Riley, it's been bubbling for a while, and all this time, it's like, because, yeah, you've been going for like 3 weeks, I didn't know if you were alive or dead, I kind of assumed you were dead, and now that's also why she she beat the shit out of Bethany. It's like, oh yeah, Bethany's gotten 15 stitches, which I love that, it seems like Riley was the fighter. It's like, anytime someone started some shit with Ellie, like, Riley would come in, and that's why Bethany's like, oh, that's why your friend's going, it's like, yeah, you shouldn't, because even Bethany was almost like, yeah, I fucked up, didn't I? And then Ellie proceeded to fuck her up, and it's like, yeah. But apparently, Riley's like, and it's so interesting that Riley would try to give her the perspective, like, oh, you kind of have to pick and choose your fights, about what's kind of worth fighting for, what's important fighting for. It's like, yeah, that's stuff she learned from the Fireflies, so. I guess that also parallels very nicely with the whole Bill and Frank thing of Bill being like, right, men like us exist for a reason, and that's to protect people, and, God help any motherfucker that gets in our way, right? So I think there's kind of a neat parallel too, where it's like, it didn't just resonate with Joel. I think that resonated with Ellie as well. Obviously, Joel wouldn't know why it would resonate with her, but either way. I even love the photo booth thing too, because if I remember correctly in the game, like the poses they strike, that's a button prompt. Like there's a couple button prompts that pop up being like, okay, do you want to make this face? Do you want to do this for the photos and stuff like that? I think, which is actually even sadder too, the photos come out way clearer in the game, if I remember correctly. They didn't have the issue of like, oh yeah, like the photos were kind of obviously the lighting for the photo booth was like screwed up, so it like didn't, like the photos didn't like develop properly. If I remember correctly, I do believe they developed perfectly fine in the game, so maybe that's them trying to be more realistic that this photo booth wouldn't be able to print out proper photos, or maybe it was screwed up in the game too and I just don't remember. Yeah, like I said, I don't remember the whole angle of Riley being part of Fedra, because it's like, oh, the reason why she's at the mall, she's like, oh, I know there's not infected there. It's like, oh yeah, they didn't realize that power was, like, when they were building out, like, more places and apartments for people, not building out, but making more apartments for people, that the mall got some of the power, they're just not aware of it yet. And it's like, right, she was stationed there. She didn't just happen upon it by accident. It's like, oh, this is where you stay. She's like, yeah. And then Ellie found all those, like, pipe bombs. And it's like, oh. And then once again, those politics come back up, because it's like, right, you're a terrorist. It's like, right, we're not going to, like, involve people. I won't let any of they won't let any of this go near you. But she's like, really? They're going to listen to you about, like, keeping these away from me? Like, yeah, it's the doing a little wrong for the right reasons. That's kind of the mentality of the Fireflies. Even Riley being like Marlene tracking her down. You can also probably tell, like, that's a little bit of, like, it's a combination of, like, I think Riley's the reason why, like, I'm sure Ellie had complex feelings about Marlene. It's like, well, for one, you're the one that recruited my best friend. You're basically going to take her away from me. But two, you were helping her out, because it's like, yo, I'm about to turn 17 soon. You know what they're going to do? They're going to make me handle, like, the sewage and stuff like that. It's like, that's all my prospects of my life. But it's like, right, with the Fireflies, even if I don't fully believe in their message, that heartbreaking line of, like, her parents died, because we'll circle back to what I was just thinking about, but it's like, continuing that thought, it's like her parents die, and for her, she's like, I've been looking for something, like, no one's accepted me, no one's wanted me. So for her, it's like, even if I don't fully know everything there is about the Fireflies and agree with everything that they do or they're about, they still chose me. It feels like I found somewhere where I belong. But for Ellie, it's like, what about me? Like, it is kind of, I get, it's that thing of, I had people, I remember people that I lost. I was young, sure, but I remember enough to know that she was already like dropped off at Fedra as a baby, so she doesn't remember her biological parents. So it's a backhanded thing because it's like, right, it's a different kind of pain of like, you were kind of alone from the beginning. I lost everything. You know, if you want to go anime parallels, it's like the Sasuke versus Naruto situation. You know, it's like, right, Sasuke had his entire family massacred by his brother, where it's like Naruto, you never knew your parents to begin with. You're always alone. It's a different type of pain, but that doesn't make Ellie's pain and loneliness any less, and that's the kind of backhandedness of it. But that's also for Ellie, it's like, but you had me, like, I was there for you, like, I chose you, and it's almost like, what, am I not good enough for you to want to stay, you know? Because for Ellie, it's like, I have no one else but you. Like, I've been miserable these weeks without you. I thought the worst happened, and now you're back just to tell me you're leaving again. It's like, right, you came back. You want to give me this special night just so you could say goodbye. Once again, not the exact thing, but you can almost look at the parallel to Bill and Frank. It's like, right, I want this one last day together, you know, and you're kind of making this unilateral decision without me. So that's what bothered Ellie, I think, so much. Is once again, especially because it's all bubbling underneath. Because there was even that cute moment where, like, she was like, oh, they were at the lingerie store. It's like, wait, I can't believe women were like wearing it. So it's like, yeah, but, you know, she's like, oh, she started laughing. She's like, I can't even imagine you wear that. She's like, shut up. And then she's in the mirror kind of adjusting her hair. And she's like, yeah, I think there was a part of her being like, you know, like, I could be like, you know, I could get a little dolled up. I could get sexy or whatever. Because she was thinking only like that because if she was going to do it, it'd be for Riley. Like, once again, she's the only person she cares about, you know? There's no one else she has, so that's why this cuts so deep. And once again, the lines that she said the last episode to Joel, it's like she's had people die, she's had people leave her behind. Like, Riley was going to be in camp number 2 of leaving her behind, but ended up being obviously camp number 1 of like people that she cares about dying, you know? I also thought it was super cute, the pun book they were reading. It was like, oh, how does a computer get drunk? It takes a screenshot. And then neither one of them's laughing, and Riley's like, what's a screenshot? Ellie's like, I don't know. I was like, honestly, that's super adorable. Of course you wouldn't know that. Like, of course you didn't grow up with technology. Even in 2003, there were computers enough to do that, you know, to know that. But I'm like, I love that joke meant nothing to you, because you're like, I don't get it. I think that's actually really sweet. And also knowing, like, the joke book, because that's the second, she already had the first one. The second one that she was reading to Joel in episode 4, the pun, like 2, it's like, yeah, that it was a gift from Riley too, which also, it's like, oh god. Once again, it makes some of that stuff now in retrospect makes it even sadder, and just like also beautiful that, you know, because I don't think they ever specified. I feel like it's pretty, well, it has to definitely be pretty quickly from Marlene finding out about her. I wonder, did Ellie go to Marlene after everything went down? Like, I don't remember those conversations in the game about, like, because we never found out, like, how long was in, but it couldn't have been that long. It had to be, like, maybe a couple days or weeks or whatever before we got to, like, the beginning where we pick up after the 20-year time skip. Like, there was probably, like, a couple days in between this story and, like, Ellie finding her way to Marlene and stuff, you know, being locked up for a couple days, you know, as they test out what, you know, the infection and stuff. But them also playing Mortal Kombat together, like, that's why it meant a lot to her when they ran into it in episode 3. Once again, like, there was direct parallels with the Bill and Frank episode. But yeah, like, the Melina fatality killing everything. But then you also have that very, like, sweet moment. Once again, like I said, the Bill and Frank, at least they had years of building that up, and for Ellie and Riley, it's like hey, we had this moment together, of like, yeah, it finally comes to the surface. Like, Ellie ends up kissing her, and it's like, you know, what do we do now? It's like, we figure it out, because she's like, I want you to stay, and Riley was going, no, I'll consider it. Like, we'll figure out what's next. And the sad thing is they never had that opportunity. At least Bill and Frank had their next. They had their next day. It's like, once again, we don't know how long Riley and Ellie were friends, so you could still make that direct parallel if they had, but it's still like, right, they're teenagers. Like, Ellie's 14, she's 17. It's like you still had your entire lives ahead of you. That's the really tragic situation of it all. And obviously, they end up getting attacked by the infected, and they're both bit. And obviously Ellie's like smashing glass because it's like, right, it's like, no, this isn't how it's supposed to be. It's like, this was supposed to be our time. This was going to be our opportunity. And it makes it even sadder because you see this moment, especially Riley be like, no, let's stay together. Like, whether it's 20 minutes or whether it's 2 seconds or 20 minutes or whatever it's going to be, let's not give up. Let's not go route one. Let's kind of enjoy what we have together. Once again, kind of like how, yes, they didn't go down the route one like Bill and Frank did, but they went down the route one, but that was together. And there was like very something beautiful and poetic about like at least like, let's stay here together, And it runs this even deeper parallel in some regards. This parallel with the Sam situation, because it all stems from the Riley situation. Because for one, Ellie had to watch it happen with Tess. Tess ended up sacrificing herself because she got infected. Henry ended up, that's why she was like, all right, I can do something now. Because she felt like she couldn't do anything for Tess before in that moment. It's like, right, we just got to get out of here. But now it's like, yo, Henry, I could do something for you. I can potentially try something, because two people that, like, yes, it was a shorter amount of time, but she did grow to care about Tess. It's like, yes, like, just more people she's lost. And it's just, I couldn't do anything for Riley. I couldn't even do anything for Tess, but I could try and do something for Sam. And that's why it hits so hard when it's like, right, are we still inside when we become these monsters? And I'm sure that probably, like, we can only assume, like, Riley turned and Ellie must have had to put her down. Maybe. And so that's probably why, like, that line probably hit even more so, because she had to watch someone she cared about. Once again, it's like, it's that, and I think I talked about this with episode 2. I don't think I directly made a parallel. I don't even think I really thought about it in either the Tess situation or the Sam situation, that she would be thinking about Riley, because I knew the storyline was there, but I still never equated it 100% in my head, knowing, like, yeah, I knew that Riley, that's how Riley's story ended. But like that once again, and that why that Left Behind ends up resonating and having so many parallels to it, because Ellie's being left behind, because it's like, cool, these are 3 people I've lost because of this. Like, yes, they've had different endings to their respective situations. Tess sacrificing herself, Bill and Frank going off together, and, Henry having to kill Sam. The fact is that it's like, right, this infected situation, I'm not infected. I get to go on, or I get left behind by all these other people because they get infected and they die. However their story is, however it plays out, however it ends, like, I'm the one that still has to keep going on, and that's like this lonely, heartbreaking element to that story. Because there was this interesting element earlier in the episode where they came across a body, and Ellie handled it very like, whoa, like, not too bothered by it. It's like, whoa, that was wild, when the body, like, oh, like, it's like, oh yeah, this guy, like, overdosed. It's again how everyone handles this situation, which I think was probably foreshadowing a little bit their circumstance. But yeah, the ground crumbling underneath the body, and just like how Ellie reacted, I think was kind of like, well, I think that kind of speaks volumes about this world. But going back to the Bill and Frank parallel of it all, that very episode, we still never had full context to why Ellie did what she did to that infected. I think that's another element where I didn't fully equate it to the Riley situation. I think it's because it was just, once again, just another reminder of what I'm left behind because of all of this. It's like, right, we just lost Tess the episode before last, and now seeing this infected, it probably just made her think of, especially kind of in an underground, like, basement area, probably made her think of the mall, and it just like, there she is, it's like being, because I attribute it to like, hey, like, Tess is gone because of this situation, this could be me. But, you know, looking at what could be her, but it's like, no, I'm not, I'm not infected. I haven't become this. And so it's just like, and that's probably why she stabbed it, because it was just, you know, especially because that's how she killed the one that bit her and Riley. So it's just like, it was anger about that too, I think, kind of fueled that decision as well. So. But that line, the episode lining up with that line about not giving up, and then like present day, Ellie's like, no, I'm not going to tell him. I'm going to do whatever I can to help Joel. And she's trying to find, and she ends up finding like a sewing needle, and she ends up sewing his wound. And that beautiful moment of their fingers kind of crossing, where she's like, no, I'm not leaving you. I got you. You didn't leave me behind. We're together. You're stuck with me, which I had to fight back the tears, because I'm like, oh God, that's the problem with knowing like future stuff. You're just like, oh God, like that seems like depressing now in some regards, because you're just like, oh, I wish I didn't know what I know storyline wise. And I'm like, if you know, you know, like I don't want to talk about it because it's a major spoiler, but I'm like, it reminds me of something that I'm like, it makes knowing what the future holds, it makes that scene even sadder in my opinion. You know? So that's why like that, and you put that in conjunction with the writing stuff, I'm like, no, I gotta fight back the tears. I can't cry at every sad thing in the show. I can't do that. Especially because like I have a little quirk about like, because I cried so much when I was younger, I kind of bottle so much stuff up now and try not to cry. So there's that what I'm kind of dealing with, but like I said, it's that interesting parallel there. And for once again, to anyone that doesn't know too, with the Left Behind story, where it ends in this episode is where the DLC ends. It literally ends with them being affected and them being together. Like, we don't see the aftermath of that. Now, certain things, without really spoiling anything, makes me feel like, and this is what I was talking about before, I was curious like how they were going to handle it, because there's some information out there that I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? And how is that going to be? Part of me wonders, are they going to show the aftermath of that in the show? They never did in the game. So part of me wonders, are we going to pick up like after the fact, like sometime afterwards when Ellie didn't turn, but Riley did? I don't know. I guess now even more so, like, damn, like making the parallel between Henry and Sam too, because it's like Henry making that choice at the end because, once again, Bill and Frank kind of made that choice in their own regard. Tess made that choice in her own regard. Riley and Ellie chose not to go down that route. So there's so many. I've said the word like 50 million times. I'm sorry, I say it all the time too. But yes, that parallel is there's layers to it, and I think it's so well and beautifully and tragically constructed. Tragically constructed in the way of like it's really good storytelling, and just like the levels and parallels and the connections you can draw between everything. I should also bring up an interesting detail too. I'm curious to see with the next episode where exactly it starts. I wonder, will it start where this section actually starts in the game, like cutscene wise, with that kind of infamous scene that's kind of been memed now, because of we'll get to it when we get to it. If they take that scene directly from the game, you kind of have to, because it's a very signature thing. But once again, because it's been turned into a meme now to some extent. So, but yeah, the point I was making is, in this section of the game, because Joel is out of commission in the game, this is a section in the game where you play as Ellie. So it is kind of an interesting gameplay section as well. But other than that, and it's something, that's why I thought was so fascinating, because I talked about this with the trailer discussion. That's what I knew. All of this happens when it starts snowing. In the game, it doesn't start snowing because it's like fall going into winter at this section of the game. But in this game, in the show, they already made it so like, oh, it's already wintry. Like, the snow had already, like, by the time we caught up with, like, Joel and Ellie at the beginning of last episode, it was already snowy. It doesn't start snowing until Joel gets impaled in the university scene, like, at where the last episode ended. That's where it started snowing. So that's why I thought it was that's why when I saw the trailer, I was like, wait, are we going to have more than one snow section? Because I was like, this section of the game is the only place where I knew there was it was a winter snow section. So that's why I thought it was so interesting. I was like, wait, like, are there going to be multiple? I was like, because I'm fairly sure when they were in Jackson, it wasn't snowing like that in the game. I'm fairly certain. It's probably like cold. Like I said, it was like fall/winter, but it hadn't started snowing until the university scene. So that's why I thought it was so interesting in the trailer. I was like, wait, we're going to have more? But it's like, yeah, they just extended out the snowy section. They made it's happened earlier in the story than it did in the game. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us. I know where we're heading because I was curious whether or not this Left Behind story would parallel with the cut back and forth between Left Behind stuff and the next story section. And you're like, oh, so we're getting to that. And it's like, yo, I'm so curious to see how they handle that. Are they going to have that twist like they do in the game? Like that reveal that they're going to have like they had in the game? Or I'm curious to see if it's going to be like a direct translation or they're going to change that up a little bit. Because I mean, obviously last episode with the university situation, they already set the stage for what's most likely the next episode. But I'm so curious to see how that plays out. Once again, like, what does that mean for like the 9th episode? Like, what's the season finale going to look like? I guess the entire episode is going to be that final section, all of that. Which makes perfect sense, but I could definitely see like the next section of what's next story beat wise. I could see that being the entire next episode. And I'm curious like how I'm so many questions. I'm so curious like if they end it where that section ends in the game, do they go a little further like they did with the Sam and Henry situation, or do they like go like skip a little bit to the next section and that's the end of the episode? Because it's kind of like a woo where the next story section kind of ends. So I'm like, are you going to end the episode on a woof? You know, like, I mean, this episode kind of ends on that in that regard, but not to this extent. So that's why I'm curious like how they plan on like pacing and structuring that. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good